Hi all and welcome to a new video. Today I wanted to showcase my progress as a painter when it comes to miniatures. A lot of channels that talk about painting aspects of the hobby are often longtime hobbyists with amazing skills and equipment that aren't always available to new hobbyists. I think while it's important to showcase and applaud the best of the best, it also is important to give entry-level painters more obtainable goals. I don't want anyone to be scared off from the hobby because they think they have to make a masterwork of art out of every model, and I will be showcasing a couple of models I've made from my very first to my very latest paint job, and giving a few notes on where I think I did good, how I did it, and where I want to improve or have already improved. I hope this will serve as inspiration for you all to start taking a crack at painting yourselves and make the hobby less intimidating as a whole. Now let's jump right into the first mini. This is the first model I ever painted, a Space Marine Assault Intercessor. It was painted with 5 colors and a shader. The 5 colors are Ultramarine, or a Mirage Blue, Abaddon Black, Lead Belcher, a red for the eyes, and Retributor Armor for the gold. Well, you can't really see the eyes from here. The worst thing about this model is the fact that even though I sprayed it with a can of air, it still did not get all the dust and dog hair off of it, and I do apologize for that. When I first started collecting in the hobby, I did not store things the best, so some of my older miniatures have some dust and grime on it that I did not intend to be on there. In general, I actually really like how this model turned out. For a first time model, I am very proud of it, and I believe my skills are only going to improve from here. Also, this is not to say you should compare yourself to this model. This might just give you something to aspire to, or you could just knock my paint job out of the park. I chose something very simple for my first time model because I wanted something simple, and also, I just really like the color blue, and Ultramarines are blue, so it was kind of quite easy. And this second mini showcases my other terrible, horrendous skill, taking photos of minis. This is the best in focus photo I could get of my Redemptor Dreadnought. It was fighting with me the entire time. I personally think the worst part about this Redemptor Dreadnought is the part you don't see, which is something I'm going to actually really show people. If you were to look at the underside of this Redemptor or open up and look at the casket, you'd see some very sloppy and choppy lines. But most people aren't going to see that. As you see from the front, it is a Redemptor Dreadnought. It works. It does what it needs to. I also painted up the miniguns separately and, had that set aside. The base, as you can see, for all my Space Marines is just a very simple dirtish base. It was my first time ever doing a base. I didn't know what I wanted to try. But I'm still pretty proud of this. Again, I did not edge highlight, although I don't think I mentioned that in my previous mini, so I'll go over it right now. I do not like edge highlighting at all. I have gone mostly to dry brushing if I want to edge highlight something or make something look like it has edge highlights. Or zenithals and contrasts. I absolutely loathe doing an edge highlight manually with a brush. Also, most of my painting techniques are put on a color that I can buy from a pot, so I can easily replicate it. I'm not a big fan of mixing or blending. It is very possible and easy to do, but I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. That being said, still pretty proud with how all this turned out. Here is Marneus Calgar, the first big character I worked on, and his Victrix Honor Guard. I like the way the bases came out on this a lot more. This is also where I discovered Steel Legion Drab, and it's when I went back and I redid all my bases with Steel Legion Drab instead of black. And I do think it pops. The Victrix and Marneus Calgar work great. I really wish they were better in the game. They were not the best when I was using them in 9th edition, and they didn't really do anything for me except show themselves as a target and immediately die, so yeah. I really hate painting human faces. I've gotten better at it, but here I did not want to try that, so for Marneus Calgar I put on the helmeted head, which is where another big tip for new painters comes. Helmeted heads are your friend. Also, a really easy way to show depth is to kind of just do shades. Like, all of this stuff is just agraxed, and it works. Yeah, I don't have the neatest lines or the best separation. You can see a little bit where colors have bled into each other, but it works. Like, from a tabletop perspective, these minis are just fine. And I would argue that anyone's minis who look this good and bring them to a table are deserving of praise. One of the things that discouraged me the most as a young hobbyist was when I brought my Ultramarines in to my local game store. And this is the only time this has happened. But on 40k night, I showed people the models I had just painted, It included some of my Necrons, which are coming up, and my Ultramarines. And I was so proud of them because I just finished them. And I went, oh, like, I'd like some feedback on these. And the person there went, that needs to be better. That needs to be better. I know now that that person, when they heard feedback, just immediately went, oh, they want to know everything they did wrong. But that crushed me more than anything else. And it actually made me stop playing 40K for a few weeks. I actually don't play 40K at all anymore, but I don't blame that event on that. That just crushed younger me, who was really proud of these paint jobs. I am perfectly fine with that person now. It was just a miscommunication. And second lesson of this, miscommunications happen all the time. Person just misunderstood exactly what kind of feedback. And because I was older getting into the hobby, they did not know that those were my first minis I had ever painted. I was also fresh to the scene and had just moved here. They had no way to know any of that. I don't blame that person at all. This is my favorite model I have ever painted. I think I can still confidently say that. I was having a really, really, really bad day at work. And after it was over, I grabbed my Indominus Captain, which was one of the, well, actually, I think this was the last model from the Indominus box, just because it intimidated me so much. I just had them in sub-assemblies and didn't know what to do, and I just started painting. I love how this turns out. I could praise it for hours. It is perfect to me. I cannot see a single flaw with this model, and sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I still think about it. Just to show more of the side and a bit more focus on my Necron, I even got the Necron painted up in my custom Necron scheme colors with the bony head, and it was perfect. It was all good. I love this model. I love staring at this. I love the color choices I made to this day. And this probably is not actually the best model paint-wise or paint scheme I've ever done. But I just used a lot of time and effort, 3 to 4 hours on him, and that probably isn't the most amount of time I've ever spent on a single model, but it felt good. And felt good. It still feels good. I'm still very happy with how he turned out. And a group shot of my Necrons. For some reason, I forgot to take individual shots, and I already have packed up my photography stuff, so I'm not going to be pulling all that back out. So this is the group shot that we have, and an individual over score pack to show the blade effects off. My Necrons were called Slanecrons by people, but I chose this color scheme before I really knew anything about Warhammer or what Slanesh was. So I accidentally made Slanecrons. Their color scheme is very simple, just uses Lead Belcher, a lot of Lead Belcher, Rune Lord Brass, Retributor Armor, sometimes Balthasar Gold in some of the later ones, and a variety of pink and purple contrasts and base paints, because contrasts weren't a thing when I started this, that are just kind of all mixed together and messy. I say contrasts weren't a thing. The contrast paints I ended up using weren't a thing when I started this, so a lot of it was the quote-unquote wet blending that I said I didn't really like doing, but the Necrons were an exception. And honestly, at the time, I did not know what wet blending was. I actually looked up the definition of wet blending right before I recorded this segment because I looked at my notes, and yeah, apparently I did wet blending. I apologize, earlier me. This is a closer up look at my score packs and what I did with them. Again, a lot of pinks and purplies. I painted all the faces like a generic bone. I believe Screaming Skull is the Citadel equivalent to what I ended up choosing, and then just putting a known oil wash over it. And I, to this day, love my Necrons. I think they're one of the best color schemes I've ever come with. All of my Necrons look good. I just never figured out how to base them. I think in the end I wanted to do like a Mars Sand, but I stopped playing 40K before I got the motivation to rebase an entire army. And another score pack model, kind of showing off a bit more of the character work I did for my Necrons, the golds and the different hues. I really like how this turned out. I love this angle. I think this is like the golden angle for this model. Now, bases are kind of controversial, but I am not always the biggest fan of bases. I've done a lot more basing lately, and I feel like that's something that just takes a lot of time and talent. For the longest time, I just ran my armies on black bases, and that's just what I did. So, you know, it's okay to do that too. Start with what you're comfortable with. This is not that complicated of a color scheme. I could probably crank out the rest of my gray Necrons that I bought before I got out of 40k in like 2 days with this color scheme. But that's fine. It works and it looks really good. Up next is some OBR goodness. Now, my OBR are amazing, and I love them. The black is not black, it's Night Lord blue, and the bone is Xandri dust. The bluish gemmy stuff is Grey Knight Steel with a blue wash over it. And the green stuff is just like 3 different green contrasts that I mixed together. Warp Lightning, I think Karajon green, and whatever other greens I had on at the time. I put one layer on, wait for it to dry, put the next layer on. I didn't do really any blending with these ones. Also, whatever blood effect I got from the Daniel Rhodes Kickstarter is on the wings, and I think it looks fantastic. The OBR are one of my favorite armies I've ever painted. I have almost the entirety of the 6,000 points of OBR I have painted, and I kind of wish they played as well as, they painted. The Morghast, which this is a Morghast, are fine models, and they're supposedly one of the best things you can bring. I have never had any luck with them. They always die really fast for me, so these guys have not seen much tabletop presence. This is also a better look at the wings and kind of the energy and the green painting of the skulls underneath. I did not subassembly this, so it was kind of a headache to go back through and do it, but I think it all turned out pretty well, and I didn't use any complicated techniques. This thing isn't even dry brush. This was before I found out dry brushing was something good. For the longest time, I refused to dry brush because I thought it was too complicated, or something I couldn't do, or something I couldn't pull off. And this is to show you that without edge highlighting, without dry brushes, you can pull off a very cohesive and very good color scheme. You don't need advanced techniques. You just need paint down. Another fun little thing. I didn't thin a single paint I used in this. Xandri Dust, I didn't thin. Night Lord's Blue, I didn't thin. There are a lot of paints you cannot thin. Now, I probably should have thinned the Night Lord's Blue. Not all of the Night Lord's stuff looks the best on all of my models, but that's a me knowing thing. I thought I was better and went, I don't need 2 thin coats. 1 thick coat works. And it works. I think it's just because I chose paints and I was lucky with the paints I got, but it works. Once again, this is shaded primarily with Agrax other than the blue wash on the Grey Knight Steel, which is my favorite cheat to give like a cool bluey hue. And up to some more recent models, a Skaven Warp Blaster. Skaven are what I feel like I have done the best so far. I am the most proud with my Skaven schemes. There is a lot of dry brushing going on, a lot of everything going on with my Skaven, actually. I use all the techniques I have learned over time with them. They're my most recent AOS-ish army. You can see the 2 Skaven models I painted in here with this Warp Blaster. There's a third that was hidden by this camera angle, but I am very happy with how this Warp Blaster turned out. I bought this model to test the schemes to see if I liked them, and I do. And my little secret for my schemes, it's all just a GW scheme. The GW YouTube channel is an amazing source for intro painters, and I am not the biggest fan of Games Workshop stuff. You know this if you watch my videos. But the Games Workshop YouTube channel is fantastic. All of the wood on here, by the way, is wild wood with a few drops of other browns mixed in from here or there. It works fantastic. It gives like a nice dark and grungy look, and I wash it with, again, Agrax. I'm sorry, I'm a one note. I'm a one note when it comes to Agrax. It fits my style. After all, things don't have to look all clean and crisp when they're super dirty. My Skaven Grey Seer is up here. The thing I am most proud about with this Grey Seer is the bones. I love just getting the slightly different bone colors. It's just so nice. I am so proud of myself every time I look at this. The rest of the model is fantastic. It has no real flaws. I dry brushed it, I did the things, and it looks really good, but those horns, those bone horns are so good. And tiny victories. Another thing that is key. Tiny victories. This would not win any painting competition it was put into. This is just a lot of contrast slapped on. I used a lot of contrast. This is 90% contrast with Grey Seer mixed in for the skin. That's it. But it works. It works. And that's all that matters. Find something that works. You don't need to be an award-winning painter. You don't need to be super complicated. You don't need to have 5 different ways to paint brown on something. You can do that. And it looks really good, but you don't need to worry about that or be intimidated by it. Here is another angle of the Gray Seer to kind of show off a bit more of it, and another angle of a Skaven model we'll see right up close right about now. The last of the Skaven models, my Clan Rats squad leader. Again, this guy is 90% contrasts. You can probably spot one or two tiny errors, but on the tabletop, he looks fantastic. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with the bases. I pretty much just did what I did with my Space Marines, and I'm thinking about maybe adding some skulls or like getting some bits that are like warp stone or something to paint them like a nice bright green and toss them on the base to contrast it out. Haven't decided yet. Still working on these guys. This is a model I randomly painted just to see what I could do. It is a Gene Stealer Cult model I painted almost 2 years ago. This is kind of out of order. I forgot to move it before the Skaven. My apologies. But this kind of shows a lot. It shows my progress as a painter. I realized when painting this as well that I do not like Gene Stealer Cult, and I sold off all of the rest of my models, but I kept this guy as a reminder that I like this paint job. I don't want to paint 100 of these guys. A random orc I painted. For the exact same reason Gene Stealer Cult, I wanted orcs. I painted an orc. I didn't really like it that much, but I kept the orc as a reminder that I did this. It's a good orc. Looks pretty nice. It's kind of on my shelf as a reminder. One of my current work in progresses alongside my Skaven are Cities of Sigmar. I love how these models turned out. It is a lot of contrast paints. The contrast yellows are fantastic. You should use them. And I love this. I love how it looks. It's a lot of snakebite leather, contrast yellows, and some iron hand steel. Good. Solid. Does what it needs to. I also see a lot of Runelord brass as well. I didn't realize how much I used it. I also see some Balthasar gold. Also, the smoke effect was really, really simple. It is just a contrast red, a contrast orange, and a speed paint black, because I don't like to W contrasts, all mixed in together and let dry and then put on the next layer, and hey, we got smoke. It looks good. Cities of Sigmar are fun. Maybe I'll do a full army showcase once I'm done with them, but I have so many models to paint, as in the rest of the starter box that I bought when Cities of Sigmar came out, and then I never did it. Woo! Here is an assortment of Cyberpunk models. We have some Maelstrom, we have a Tiger Claw, we have some Arasaka, and we have a Lawman. Just some nice, simple models that aren't too complicated to do. I used a lot of simple colors on them, which I kind of regret now. I wish I had made them more like cyberpunky, but Arasaka was quite literally just black with Screaming Skull dry brush, and it works. Red highlights, of course, on the Saka logos, but still, it works. I also used my Grey Knight Steel with blue wash to give kind of cool sheen effects on a lot of these guys. It's my favorite little go-to trick now ever since I discovered it with OBR. Here is a tank I painted for bolt action. I love painting bolt action tanks. And as you can see, it is very simple. This tank is Xandri Dust, Lead Belcher, and Dark Camo Green from Pro Acrylic. It is simple. It did not take me long to paint. It was easy. I painted this thing in like 45 minutes, but it is tabletop ready and it fits in with my Italians. You don't have to spend hours to make something perfect. I just looked up some historical pictures, took some inspiration, and went to town with paintbrushes. Technically, all the green is freehand, but I don't really think it's freehand. I was trying to emulate historical Italian tank patterns. I ended up probably not doing the best job emulating, but hey, it worked. It looks good. Here are my Paraducci, and I am using these guys as an example of what to do if you're lazy. These guys are camo green and dark camo green, kind of here and there, along with some browns and metals, dry brushed with Screaming Skull, which was probably a mistake, but I wanted to make them look highlighted. The skin is Barbarian Flesh, washed with, I think, Gilliman Flesh, or Known Oil, one of the two. Can't remember which. As you can see, they're kind of formless for something that should be all bright green, brown, and darker green all together. I will probably one day go through with the Paraducci to do the patterns, but I really did not want to do the patterns for Paraducci, so I was lazy, and that's okay. For bolt action, a good rule of thumb is to do semi-historical, or at least historical inspired, to point at a picture and go, hey, it kind of looks like this. If I point and go, hey, I just kind of did them as dark camo green because, I'm not good with patterns, it's fine. But not a single person in real life has ever questioned my paint scheme because they just look at it and go, hey, those look good. And they keep going. So, keep that in mind as well when you're choosing your paint scheme. Sometimes you just find something that looks good. If you don't have the skills to do what it should be, just go back later. But make it look good for now. And now some BattleTech mechs that I have painted. I have painted up about 30 BattleTech mechs across my BattleTech career. And then the Mercenaries Kickstarter came in and about 150 BattleTech mechs and vehicles went into my closet. 150 is probably an exaggeration, probably closer to like 75, but still. I have a lot of battle mechs to go through. These guys are fun to paint. I kind of just use base colors and some nice little highlights here or there, usually metallic highlights, and have some fun with it. Simple is good at the BattleTech scale. Simple is good. But I still think these guys look pretty darn good. These guys are an example of how to make something look cooler than it actually is. These were my first ever, and I mean first ever, experimentation with dry brush. It is just a nice dark blue. I can't remember the paint name I used. I couldn't find it when I was trying to look through my shelves. I apologize. Whatever red I had on hand to highlight, because again, I have like 100 reds, and then dry brush with lead belcher, and it looks fantastic. Like this is what made me realize dry brushing is good. I love this paint scheme so much. And now, contrast only models. These guys were painted only with contrast. I lie, the flesh tones are barbarian flesh washed with Gilliman. But other than that, contrasts. Contrast is good. Use contrast. These guys look great on the table when I am playing Saga Crusade, which, by the way, there should be a video about Saga Crusade sometime in the future. I am absolutely loving my time with it. But, contrasts. Oh, I double lied. I think I used Iron Hand Steel for the metallics because I don't like contrast metallics. But hey, other than that, contrasts. Those are the only two paints. I'm sorry. I know I said contrast like 80 times. This is a good thing. I painted these guys up within a day, like 2 months ago. Works pretty well. On my paint tracker, they say they were painted in December. So yes, I painted them up in December. They look good and they work. And here are some of the stuff I am most proud of, my Legion Imperialis. I use a lot for my Legion Imperialis, more than I probably should. All of the blacks you see are Abaddon Black. All of the metallic is Iron Hands. All of the red is a mix of Flesh Terror's red and Gal Vorback. All of the shading is all done by Agrax. I think you guys would have guessed. And any little green hues you see on the Rhino, and there should be some of the Kratos, but I think I grabbed the wrong Kratos that I hadn't done it for, that are like the little viewports, are Warp Lightning. These guys are simple, but oh my gosh, they look so good on the table. The Word Bearers did everything wrong, as in the Legion itself did nothing wrong, but Erebus did everything wrong. I love the story of the Word Bearers, and they are what has inspired me to get into Legion Imperialis and make a video about it and ramble about it. They also, that love for the Word Bearers caused me pain. I spent too much on Legion Imperialis, but I made an entire video talking about that and having regret because I succumbed to something that I made a video on how to avoid, FOMO. And that's it. Those are all of the models I have painted. None of them could win anything. Maybe if I entered some novice painting competition at a local game store, I could do something, but none of them are winning a Golden Demon. None of them are going on some thumbnail as some fantastic, amazing paint job. But they work. As a wargamer, I have never once had my army insulted. I know I told a story about feedback, but the person did not mean any of that meanly, so I don't count that. Never once having an army insulted is good. And if someone insults your army, don't play with them. Get out there and paint. Have fun. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to learn. And the stuff you make now is going to look so much better than the stuff you made 2 years ago. Or if you're starting now, in 2 years, it's going to be night and day. We have peaks. As humans, when we learn something new, we learn a lot really fast, and then we start learning slower. I have improved very slowly over the last year, but that's okay. I feel like I've improved a lot since my first model. And for me, painting was something I thought I could never do. Growing up, medication I took for my asthma left me with very, very shaky hands. And now, through the focus of painting and holding tiny miniatures and doing all of this, I control my hands better than I ever have. And that just feels good. This is an amazing hobby for a multitude of reasons. And hey, hopefully this inspired you to do something. Have a wonderful week, all, and I'll see you all next weekend.